So my speech title was Deconstructing Business Through Art. And I thought I had it all worked out, and then at the last minute I changed my mind, and I figured it would be disingenuous to not just follow what I initially thought of. So my background is fairly simple. By the time that I was 10, I knew that I wanted to be a painter, much like you knew what you want to do with your life. It's the only thing that I knew concretely. And over the years, working hard, developing a portfolio, ended up in a school, ended up with a great job in an art gallery and with a mentor that the first thing he did was lock me in a closet and made me listen to How to Sell Anything to Anybody tapes, which was rather ridiculous for my frame of mind at that time because I still had lofty ideas about what art was and what art wasn't. I could say thanks to that guy now if he were still alive because it gave me a dose of reality. And that reality is business can be art. Business can be treated like an art form. In fact, I've owned 3 fairly successful companies in my lifetime, and I can honestly say I've never made a good business decision. So our specialty is creating that works. Is pewter and zinc countertops that were made in France 200-300 years ago. The oldest restaurant in France has a pewter bar top that looks better today than it ever will. Now, it'll look better in another 100 years. But they age well, they do things. It's a form of art that lives with its community. Everything that happens to it leaves a trace. Every time a glass is put down, it leaves a trace. And kind of like life. One of the reasons that I fell in love with them is because they show everything. They show every problem. They show everything that has ever happened, and everything leaves a trace. And that's just like our lives. So the idea that I had initially was to figure out, well, they did this in the 1500s, how do you do it today? We had to come up with a unique approach of manufacturing and try and come up with new ways of doing things that weren't tied to very dangerous situations that foundries had in the 1500s. And keeping in line that we were going to do progressive things, use the materials for the unusual requests that we get from our clientele. Recently, someone sent us this piece of fabric that's actually made out of horsehair. It was used in the 1800s for chair covers, and said, I want a backsplash made to look like this horsehair. And initially, every other metal worker in the country that they approached with this thing said, you're crazy. Why do you want this? Why can't you just have something else? Our philosophy as a business is we're there to please the client, and quite frankly, I get bored very easily, so a challenge is welcome. So taking something that's a static, unusual, weird item and turning it into a functional form of art that can live inside somebody's home and, quite frankly, give them a sense of pleasure that doesn't exist without pattern. I'm of the belief that patterns and shapes and symbols, much as Jay talked about with in China, have a severe, heavy influence on our lives. They are everywhere around us. Everybody in this room has egg and dart molding somewhere in their house, but doesn't know what it means. I mean, the reality is those images are subversive. The history of egg and dart, anecdotally and interesting, is actually a fertility symbol for out of Egypt. It's basically penises and vaginas, penises and vaginas, penises and vaginas. The crazy thing is during the Victorian era, when it was the most repressive area, everything was covered with egg and dart. And so, no one is useless in this world that lightens the burdens of another. our job is to create beautiful spaces and beautiful things, quite frankly, for the top 5% of the top 1%. Our duty, and or at least my working class belief system, is to translate that back to people. One of the things that we started doing recently is we started working with Chatham Apprentice Program, which is a nonprofit that takes people that are at risk and trains them to show up to work on time, to have a career. I recently spoke at their graduation and ended up hiring 2 people. One person that just got out of prison after 30 years, and one person that got out of prison after 10 years, giving a second chance in life. And I'm extremely proud that we are taking people that are on the margins of society and mixing them in with the top percentage people. And then one of the interesting things that we have at our shop is if you work on a project, you actually get to deliver that project. So if you're working on a range hood that costs more than you will make in a year, and you get to drive it up to Long Island to install it in the Hamptons, what have you. Our company's passionate. We love what we do. If we didn't do it, quite frankly, I would be muttering on the streets and homeless. One of the things that we want to do as a business that doesn't do a local business is we want to treat Savannah like a showroom. So my goal in 3 years is to have Savannah have more pewter bar tops than Paris does per capita. We want to bring our influence into the city and use our city as a showroom where visitors from New York or Los Angeles are coming in, and instead of just coming into a static place, they're going around the city and viewing things. And so far, it's worked out fairly well. This statement is basically my core belief in life. It's kind of strange that this is housed in a museum. I mean, we're having this meeting in a museum. And a museum can be like a jail to art. Art has to leave the frame. It has to be considered a daily part of our life. It has to live within inside us, and our decisions have to be based on creativity and art. If we don't do that, then we are subject to just repeat the same problems. We will never progress. We will never transform. And that's it. Thank you.